Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Today we're going to study or just read basically the book of Jonah. It's a short book. I think you'll find it encouraging. So let's get right into it. This is Jonah chapter 1 and verse 1. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind as we read this is the bigger plan that Yahweh has for mankind, and that is after the fall of man in Genesis chapter 3, and then, of course, the flood starting in Genesis 6. And then the nations with their different languages. Yahweh chose one man and his family to institute his plan of salvation, okay? And he could have chose any person who had a heart towards him, obviously, but he chose Abraham. And so that's the big picture. Yahweh is working throughout human history in order to bring about his rescue plan, to rescue us from the curse, which came in Genesis 3. Okay, so with that in mind, Jonah 1:1, the word of Yahweh. Keep in mind, all caps, that's Yahweh in Hebrew, the name of the God of the Bible. The word of Yahweh came to Jonah. Jonah's name means dove, incidentally. Son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh. Now, one thing you have to know, Nineveh was the city of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which were basically it would end up being the empire that came in and took the northern kingdom into captivity later on in 722 BC. This is around 750 to 725 BC when this event's going on. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from Yahweh and headed for Tarshish. It's a long way off. Some scholars think it was in Spain or Portugal, that area. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from Yahweh. Then Yahweh sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, or Elohim, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us and we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship Yahweh, the God of heaven." Okay, now that in Hebrew, remember Hebrews from right to left, he's saying, "I worship Yahweh, Elohi, Ha Shamayim, Yahweh Elohi Hashamayim. That's Yahweh, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. Okay, so he's the creator of all. This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from Yahweh because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried to Yahweh, "O Yahweh, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Yahweh, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared Yahweh, and they offered a sacrifice to Yahweh and made vows to him. But Yahweh provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, now this is a key messianic prophecy, and you can read that in Matthew 12:40, where Yeshua tells the religious leaders that there's a sign that will show that he is the Messiah. And it's referring back to this event. This event is a prophetic foreshadowing of the Messiah who would come, who would be in the belly of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. And that is, he gives that to them as a sign. And you can read that there. Chapter 2, Jonah's prayer. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to Yahweh, his Elohim. He said, "In my distress, I called to Yahweh, and he answered me. From the depths of the grave," that is Sheol in Hebrew, "I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the deep, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I've been banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you brought my life up from the pit." And that word pit there is analogous to, it's used quite often for Sheol, the grave. "But you brought my life up from the pit, O Yahweh my Elohim. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Yahweh, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs." "But I, with the song of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good." Salvation comes from Yahweh. And that word salvation is Yeshuatah. Okay, from right to left, Yeshuatah. Remember, when you see the Shua, the Sheen Wav Ayin, that means salvation or saves. And Yeshua, some people call him Jesus. His name is Yahshua. His name is Yahweh's salvation. Salvation comes from Yahweh. Okay, verse 10. And Yahweh commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Chapter 3, verse 1. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of Yahweh and went to Nineveh. Now Nineveh was a very important city. A visit required 3 days. On the first day, Jonah started into the city, and he proclaimed, 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overturned. The Ninevites believed Elohim. They declared a fast, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. Then he issued a proclamation in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let any man or beast, herd or flock, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on Elohim. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? Elohim may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger, so that we will not perish. When Elohim saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. And we see that in God's word. We see that about him, that he will do that. Okay, I just added that back to the narrative here. Chapter 4, verse 1. But Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to Yahweh, "O Yahweh, is this not what I said when I was still at home? That is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate Elohim, slow to anger and abounding in love, an Elohim who relents from sending calamity." And if you watch my video, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that was the introduction I used. That's from Exodus 34, verse 6 through 7. Verse 3, now, Yahweh, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. So we can see Jonah's anger here, that God, Yahweh, is having compassion on the Ninevites. But Yahweh replied, have you any right to be angry? Jonah went out and sat down at a place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then Yahweh Elohim provided a vine and made it grow up over Jonah to give him shade for his head, to ease his discomfort. And Jonah was very happy about the vine. But at dawn the next day, Yahweh provided a worm which chewed the vine so that it withered. Okay, verse 8. When the sun rose, Elohim provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint. He wanted to die and said, it would be better for me to die than to live. But Elohim said to Jonah, do you have a right to be angry about the vine? I do, he said. I'm angry enough to die. But Yahweh said, you've been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city? Okay, so just some quick pointers. You can see my notes here. The king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire or this is the list of kings. Now, during this time that Jonah came to Nineveh, he was a prophet to Israel, and Yahweh called him to go speak to Nineveh. Now, about 750 to 725 is when it's thought he went to Nineveh. And that would have been possibly the king was Ashur Nerari. Probably, in my opinion, probably this guy was king at this time. Could have been Tiglath-Pileser III, but I don't know. Just studying on him, he doesn't seem like the kind of person who would humble himself in sackcloth. But I could, I don't know. And these people obviously are real kings in history, and there's lots of extra biblical evidence to support that. Okay, so when we started this study, I said, to keep in mind of God's, Yahweh's big plan. Okay? Yahweh's big plan in history is to save mankind. Okay, in Genesis chapter 3, you can read about the fall of man and how, back up a little bit there in the creation, when Yahweh created everything, it was very good. And if you followed one of my studies in an earlier video, I spoke about the word Hina. It means behold. From the video, what is the God of the Bible's name? In Exodus chapter 3, we learn that word, behold, Hina. Well, that's what Yahweh did. When he finished his creation, he said, behold, Hina, it is very good. And he gave mankind free will, and mankind chose poorly. Our ancestors, Adam and Eve, chose poorly, and they chose to go their own way, not God's way, Yahweh's way. And so sin and the effects of sin, the punishment for which is eternal separation from Yahweh, the source and giver of life, came into the world. So Yahweh instituted his quote-unquote rescue plan, and that involved Yeshua coming to die for our sins. Yeshua means Yahweh's salvation. And so we have to understand that the God of the Bible is not just concerned with the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, but he's concerned with spiritual Israel, okay? And that is all those who would seek him, find him, and follow him. And he makes it clear that all peoples of the world, all people will be blessed when he told Abraham, all the people of the world, and that means salvation will be available to all. So we're going to finish up by reading my notes here in the bottom. Okay, you see highlighted the story of God's loving concern for all people. Okay, so God chose to use one family to bring about his rescue plan and to bring about the Messiah, and that was through the family of Abraham. And this verse from Isaiah sums it up well. Isaiah 49:6. It is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation, and remember, Yeshua is Yahweh's salvation, that my salvation may reach the ends of the earth. And that is the big picture of the book of Jonah. Okay, Yahweh is using the family of one person. He could have chose anybody. He chose Abraham to bring about his salvation plan to the earth. And God add his blessings to the reading of his word.